Hey guys, welcome into the Bear With Us podcast. I am Jack. He is Frank. As always, we are going to talk some Bears football. You might be asking yourself, what news could they possibly have? And none. There's no news. I mean, there's one item on the agenda, and then we want to talk a little. NFL.com put out their draft grades for the NFC North. Obviously, the Bears are in that division, so I wanted to touch on that. And then we are going to go into our quarterback carousel because things could spin pretty quickly. So we want to get our thoughts locked in on paper before franchise tags start going and all that good stuff. So I'm sure all of this will be super accurate, super relevant in the next few days, and nothing we say will be wrong. But Frank, let's start with like the little tidbit of news. The Bears have cut Al-Qadim Muhammad after one season. I think he had one sack. Just not a very productive year for the free agent signing from Indianapolis. What are your thoughts? I mean, I know it wasn't like, it's not a marquee player going down, but what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I'm glad it happened. Just like you said, he was pretty unproductive, and that's putting it nicely throughout the year. I mean, at times, if we were like to search our text thread when we were watching games, it was just like, what the fuck is he doing out there? Like, we didn't, I mean, it got pretty bad at times. But I mean, to me, this is just another, good sign from Poles for me. You tried it. He got I think it was a 1-year deal or two-year deal. You cut where you see fit. Like, Poles doesn't seem to be just holding on to guys just because, my initial evaluation was right. I mean, at the very least, it has to show you that they're continuing to evaluate throughout, seasons. But I think ultimately, Jack, it is disappointing. I mean, we didn't expect him to be like Julius Peppers or anything, but that signing to me signified like some sort of steadiness on the defensive line that we just did not get. Now, again, I'm not saying, we thought this was going to be like a top 10 pass rush, but Al-Qadim Muhammad was just like a professional defensive lineman. That's what we thought we were getting. And we didn't get that. Like, had I sort of had the same expectations for him that I did when the Bears signed Pernell McPhee back in the day. Like, was the contract a tad bit bloated? Sure, maybe. But, like, you knew what you paid for. You got what you got. A high motor guy who was going to bring it every night, get some pressures. He usually got 5 to 8 sacks. I mean, that's cool. I mean, to get 3 pressures and 1 sack in a season, man, like, I don't care how much you're getting paid at the NFL level. That's bad. That's really bad. So, overall disappointment. But again, I do like that at least signifies that there's ongoing evaluations from this regime.
It's an optimistic way to put it. I like that. It is disappointing in the sense of how much we were excited about the sign. And again, I don't, Frank and I weren't expecting this to be Khalil Mack in 2018. Like that, of course, that's not going to happen. But the guy who just had his career year in his age 26 season, going into his 27th age, and he'd just been with the head coach that got hired. So it looked like a guy that could step right in and make an impact on a defense that really needed a pass rush. That, of course, also being expectations put on Robert Quinn rebounding, Trevis Gibson at the beginning of this era, Trevis, excuse me, however the fuck's broadcast was saying it. But it's just like, it just didn't pan out for some inexplicable reason. Like, Al-Qadim Muhammad was so bad that he was tied for 7th in sacks on this team. And this team did not have a whole lot of sacks. Like, he was tied with Joe Thomas, Armand Watts, and Robert Quinn for sacks with 1.
Yeah. I mean, Jack,
like
you're speaking to...
He had 6 sacks the year before. It's just so weird how it just didn't translate. It's very strange.
Yeah. And I mean, that sort of goes into my pessimistic take on things, is that he wasn't the only free agent signing that was a failure by Ryan Poles. Granted, again, I'm willing to call everything a wash because he wasn't working with the most amount of money, and if Larry Ogunjobi is healthy, maybe like it's a totally different defensive line, right? But the one thing that we really liked about Ryan Pace, and this, I don't even know if we were doing a podcast yet, was like he was finding guys to re-sign after, sort of testing them out for a year or two. Akeem Hicks wasn't Akeem Hicks when he came to the Bears. Right. Like, they found him and maybe even played a huge role in his development there. And it's like, as a rebuilding team, you really accelerate things if you can get 1 or 2 hits in a year like this. They didn't even get the 1 or 2. And as a matter of fact, like, guys like Darnell Mooney on the opposite side of the ball, guys like, I don't know if the opinion on Jalen Johnson swayed, but like, they didn't exactly take the steps that we wanted them to. You know what I mean? So it's like, there's also that part of it too. So it's overwhelmingly makes me feel like there's a lot of work to do still. Versus like, if he gets 7 sacks, you're like, hey, if Travis Gibson gets like 7 sacks, you're like, man, maybe they got a little, they still need like the guy, but here are some solid up. There's like nothing. Like who can you be optimistic about right now, on that defensive line?
Well, I think that's a good transition to sort of the draft and how it's looked at, because you're right. The overall team, I don't think there was a lot of guys that stood out that really improved their game outside of maybe I'd say Jaquan Brisker and even Braxton Jones to a certain extent. While I don't think he improved to become an all-pro lockdown left tackle, I do think that he was as good, very consistently good throughout the season. Like, yeah, he had some ups and downs. Of course he did. He's a 5th-round rookie, but I think that was a guy that they did hit on. And so we wanted to take a look at NFL.com's. They had their draft grades for the NFC North, and I'll run through the team's grades. I'm not going to go through what he said for each team. I do want to break down some of what he said for the Bears. We'll go through that, but just grade wise, surprisingly, the Bears finished 2nd in the grades. The Detroit Lions finished with an A-. Obviously, a very, very productive, good draft for them. The Bears with a B-. The Packers with a C-, and then the Minnesota Vikings finished last with a D, with a grade D, which I'm sure that they're not, exactly excited about. So the Bears finished with a B-. I'm not going to go through each player that they drafted, but I'll just read a little of what Eric Edholms had to say in his article, and then we'll kind of break it down. So missing the 1st-round pick from the Justin Fields trade, which ended up being number 7 overall, had to sting a bit for first-year GM Ryan Poles. But the Bears managed to check off some important boxes on the offensive line and in the secondary via their day 2 and 3 selections, as well as the undrafted free agent pool. Obviously, we can guess who he's talking about there. Kyler Gordon and Jaquan Brisker ended a trial by fire at times as rookies on a thinned-out Chicago defense, but they combined to produce 7 interceptions, 8 passes defended, and 2 forced fumbles in their 29 combined starts. Brisker also added 4 sacks, but missed some tackles and mental errors stood out. Gordon was picked on at times, but also picked off Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen in consecutive games. So let's obviously talk about those first 2 paragraphs. First, starting with trading the number 7 overall pick for Justin Fields. Yeah, I'd rather have Justin Fields than the
100%
number 7 overall pick.
Yeah, easily. I mean, because what would this year have been without that? Like now this would legitimately be a wasted year.
Well, because we'd be gearing up for Bryce Young or CJ Stroud.
No, for sure. And that's what I mean, though. We would just be looking for a quarterback. Like, this would be a total reset that I would not be prepared for. Like, the last year would have been unwatchable without Justin.
Number 7 pick this year was the Giants drafting Evan Neal, which I think that was a pretty good pick, but I'd rather have Justin Fields than Evan Neal and a question at quarterback, if I'm being honest with you.
I'm right there with you.
The defensive backs, you and I have talked about those two just a number of times in regards to just their season overall, obviously being the biggest name draft pick so far in the Brian Poles tenure. Yeah, I mean, listen, the stats sound great. 7 combined interceptions between 2 rookies. I think that's awesome. Picking off Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen, I think that is an accomplishment, absolutely. Brisker being a guy who could get 4 sacks in a defense that really couldn't generate pressure, I think that's awesome. But I think that's a little bit of kind of what we talk about when stats really don't explain or tell the whole story. I think they ended the season on a positive note. I absolutely believe that. But I don't know. The stats don't really mean anything to me. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. The stats make it sound a little bit better than what it was. But I lean more towards what you said, though. They ended the season strong. They showed a lot of improvement throughout that year, especially Kyler Gordon. Like, Jaquan kind of was who he was for the whole season. And that wound up, like, honestly, if that's his floor, I'll take that from my strong safety. Yeah. Some of the mental errors, some of the bad angles for tackles, you hope that gets cleaned up with the full off season and everything, and just maturity at the NFL level. But the one we really saw, I mean, Kyler for like the first 4 weeks was great at the worst starting corner in the league. So that was not good. But we saw him start to really show those ball hawking skills to a point where I was just like, hey, what's Eddie's contract looking like? Could we like cut him and put Kyler at safety, especially with, this year's draft is pretty well known to be pretty deep at corner. You draft another one maybe in the second or third, but yeah, he showed immense improvement. But if you have to isolate just the season, like if we're not taking, expecting development further, I probably give both of them a C. With the context of being, we didn't want two secondary pieces. Like I would rather have either Alec Pierce or George Pickens, just flat out point blank.
Right. And I think it's worth noting that it wasn't like there was a guy who came on late and the pressure, really started. They improved without the pressure really performing. So you can only imagine what happens if they do get Jalen Carter or Will Anderson and sign, Deron Payne or something like that improves that front four to make it a little bit easier for that back four. So, I think signs are pointing up for that. So I don't argue with anything they put there. Braxton Jones was the steal of the crop. He stepped in at left tackle and looked to be exactly the kind of athletic mover and mentally tough competitor the Bears were seeking. Even with a few glitches, Jones' future appears to be bright. Frank, do you agree? Do you agree that Braxton Jones should be kind of locked in as the left tackle?
I don't know about locked in at the left tackle. I think he needs to be locked in on the starting, like on the line. Even if you shift him to left guard or move him over to right tackle. My only reservation there is that I feel like we had similar sentiments of Larry Borum last year going from left to right, and he didn't have the greatest year at right tackle when he was healthy. So, there's worries there. Who knows if that's the transition or just that's not his fit, whatever. But I think with his play, he's earned himself somewhere on the line. But he didn't play well enough to say, oh, you just don't look at left tackles either in the draft or in free agency. Like, absolutely not. But with that said, he was a 5th round pick and he started every single game. Like, that is a fucking accomplishment. That is very good. So, like, that is an A+ draft pick. Like, you don't just do that because you need a warm body. Like, they would have gone out and gotten someone else to protect their quarterback, their young, blossoming quarterback, if he was an absolute bum. And he wasn't. He played very good at times. He played, he had some blunders. There was one really bad game, and was that the Washington game where he just kept getting run over? And it
happened at the end of the season too.
Yeah, and I'm blanking on what game that was. Those are the two that really stood out. But realistically, I like the article drafting up like his athletic abilities, because that was the book on him coming in when I read his scouting report after we drafted him. He's very athletic. It's his base strength that he needs to work on. And that's really what we saw. The bull rushes is what he couldn't handle. He kept getting run over. So at the NFL level, you would think with that type of athletic training, with that type of nutrition, with that type of steroids, that he can get stronger over an offseason. And because he has the athleticism to play that position. His hand placement seems to be very good. Footwork is very good. It's just that core strength. So, yeah, I think he may be one of the whole steals of the entire draft, dude. Like if you get a starting tackle left or right that late in the draft, that's an accomplishment as a GM.
Yeah, I think you make a great point talking about how he wasn't just starting because he was just a guy. Like they tried combinations all over the offensive line, and that was pretty much from day one. The only thing that was consistent throughout the entire season was Braxton Jones at left tackle. So, I think athleticism-wise, he's definitely a guy that you can count on, and obviously the tough competitor. I think that's a great point as well. He was one of those guys we were begging for last year to sort of, with Tevin Jenkins to sort of stand up for your quarterback when he's getting hit, and Braxton Jones would do that. So that was nice to see. Rounding out the little article right here, Velus Jones did not earn the coach's trust in year one outside of some late season opportunities. He has some juice as a runner and returner, but appears unrefined so far as a receiver. With Jones turning 26 in May, the Bears must figure out his utility quickly. Dominique Robinson started 7 of his final 8 games, but was held without a sack or even a quarterback hit. Jack Sanborn and Jalen Jones played well enough to earn roster shots in 2023, but the rest of the group was underwhelming. Let's start with Velus Jones, because that's kind of the biggest name. The more I think about it, the less likely I think that it is he's guaranteed to be just cut outright during the summer. I think he'll get at least during the season opportunity. Like, he might get cut week 6, if he keeps fumbling punts and things like that. But I don't see them cutting a 3rd round pick this quickly. And we'll see how he improves as a receiver. But the point's right there in the article. He is going to be turning 26, and that was one of the things, Frank, that when the draft happened, you and I were sort of kind of shooting down some of the stuff because the age stuff was just getting out of hand. And if the floor was going to be high, then that's okay. If he was going to be a more finished product, then him being 25 doesn't matter. The problem is that he's turning 26, and it feels like he's as much of a development project as Dominique Robinson is. That's the really big issue.
That was going to be my exact point, Jack, is like, we weren't upset about it because, and this is really going to be my theme throughout the whole offseason when we talk about the moves that we want the Bears to make. We need to raise the floor. It doesn't matter how high the ceiling is if the floor is too low. Then you're talking about a 8-win, 7-win team because you're going to be so inconsistent. When they drafted Velus Jones, notice I say they when I don't like him, and it's we when I like him. We thought that the floor was high. We're like, he's 25 years old, going to be 20. He turned 26 in the season, right? Or he will be 26 for next year.
He's going to turn 26 in May.
Okay, but older prospect. But you're like, hey, that's someone you just plug in at the slot. He's going to be your kick return guy, punt return guy. And we knew he was really good with the ball in his hands. That's different, halfback plays, maybe different wildcat play. I mean, you're thinking of different ways, different holes that he can fill on this whole roster to up that floor. It just simply wasn't there. Like, I don't think me or you were ever like, oh yeah, he has like a shot to be a number 1 receiver. Because you watch the film, his route tree is not very refined, but it's very clear that he's a very athletic, very fast player. And you thought you were at least getting that, and they didn't get anywhere near that. Like, it wasn't even close to what the expectations were, especially given, I think the biggest disappointment was it's not like he came into, a Miami Dolphins wide receiver room. It's not like he came into a Minnesota Vikings wide receiver room. He came into the Bears wide receiver room with, like, realistically, if you had half of a route tree in good hands and didn't fumble, you could have been their number 1 this year. Not for the long term, but like, that's how bad the talent was, in that room, and you just couldn't take advantage of it. That's the disappointing part.
He reminds me a lot of Cordero Patterson, and I would not be surprised if his career kind of goes that way as well, where he's like never like a 1,000-yard receiver guy, but he's like 700, 800 with 4 or 5 touchdowns, and then some team tries him out as running back, and then they kind of get like. This team, if they just keep using him on jet sweeps, like that's not going to do anything. He gets maybe 10 yards every now and then, but it's just not. You're right. He didn't take just any sort of step forward in terms of opportunity. He just didn't grab the moment, and it was unfortunate. And he has the speed. They just sort of have to work him into this offense in a way where you can get him touches. How they do that remains to be seen. Dominic Robinson, I don't think there's a lot to say about that. He 1.5 sacks. He was a 5th-round pick. Didn't really have a lot of expectations. Former
quarterback and like receiver. Like, that was clear. He was a project pick. If he never amounts to anything, it is what it is.
Yeah. Jack Sanborn and Jalen Jones are the other 2 mentioned here. Obviously, Jack Sanborn was a revelation at linebacker. I think he's absolutely going to be given a shot to win the starting job at starting linebacker. And then Jalen Jones, as much shit as we gave him, he was one of those guys at the end of the year where you're like, wait, is that Jalen Jones out there? Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right. So, maybe they have a little more corner depth. He's not going to be a starter, right? But he does give you a little bit more depth, especially if he continues to improve the way he did this year.
No, I totally agree. I think the only thing that I disagreed with the description that you read, I thought that completely encapsulated my feelings of Jalen Jones about like, oh, he's going to be given a shot. I think Jack Sanborn is your middle linebacker next year. I don't see how he can't be.
Not even thinking twice about it.
No, and maybe you get like a 5th-round pick for depth or like a veteran minimum guy for depth, but he showed me way more than enough. Unless you're very concerned about the injury. He played,
which they shouldn't.
Which right, they shouldn't be. Again, it came to a point. People can go back to our TikTok clips or earlier episodes. Like the first few games, you're like, man, for an undrafted rookie, he's doing some things. But it was about the 4th or 5th week, and we were like, wait a minute now. Fuck the undrafted status. He's playing good football. Like I don't care if he was a 1st-round pick or a 1,000,000th round pick. He is playing very well. So yeah, I mean, to me, he should, I mean, the team is so bad coming off of this year that you're not going to say no to competition basically anywhere outside of maybe quarterback. But that is one that if we don't sign someone, that is going to immediately take his spot, unless there's like a Luke Kuechly, Brian Urlacher type, Patrick Willis that's just out there waiting to be scooped up, which there isn't. That spot can be left alone outside of depth.
Okay. I'm not going to disagree with you. When it comes to undrafted, it kind of reminds me of how you talk about running backs in general, with rookies and just overall. Obviously not talking about the top tier guys, but maybe not necessarily Dameon Pierce, but a guy like that where it's like, yes, he had a very good season, but don't be surprised if there's a guy next year looking to take his place. Myles Gaskin is, I think, a great example. Like people were locking him in as the starter in Miami, and then they just went nuts and started bringing guys in. So I don't disagree that I think Jack Sanborn could be the starting middle linebacker. I would just be surprised if they don't, like you said, bring in a 3rd round, 4th round pick, something like that to for depth purposes or whatever. But I mean, in a season where there just wasn't a whole lot, he was definitely one of the brightest spots possible.
Yeah. And that's the thing. That's why I think I wouldn't even be looking middle linebacker unless I'm sure that this is Brian Urlacher resurrected, because there's so many other holes. To me, that'd be a wasted pick when you have a guy that, even if he doesn't have as good of a year that he did in his limited time, like to stretch that out over a full year, you at least have something to plug in for this year,
Right.
So
right, and again, it's kind of what we talked about after the draft last year, where they had the secondary pieces. Now it was kind of like, okay, we're not exactly thrilled, but as long as that means that they don't spend a lot of money at the cornerback spot, they don't spend a high draft pick at the defensive back spot in this upcoming draft, then fine. It is what it is. It gives you, some more flexibility to improve other things. If Braxton Jones ends up being a starter on the offensive line, great. That's one less spot you have to worry about moving forward on a roster where, just the needs are just absurd. All right, Frank, let's get into our quarterback carousel. I had some fun with this. I did a couple columns. I did what I think will happen for everyone, and then what I want to happen. Some guys I didn't really answer that because I didn't really think it mattered too much. But I did want to sort of give it a shot here. So let's go ahead and get started. I think we have a similar order just in terms of how we texted each other. So we'll start with the biggest fish in the pond, the one we know 100% will be on a new team. Let's start with Derek Carr. Where do you have Derek Carr ending up this offseason?
This one was hard for me, Jack, because I have him going to the Jets because there's a lot of smoke in that direction. But that's not what I want to happen. I want him to go to Carolina just because I feel like it adds to like the craziness that's happened over the last few years.
Okay.
But I also think he brings them like a steady quarterback that they just have not had. I mean, Carolina's tried fucking everything the last couple of years, and I think he would sort of provide that that baseline level of quarterback play that would really rise them and probably be like a back half playoff team. But I think he's going to the Jets. Where do you got him going?
I have Derek Carr ending up in New Orleans.
Oh,
And I know that cap-wise, it's going to be a little bit challenging, but we've seen New Orleans make things work even when it's all seems impossible. I mean, just you think about the division and how winnable it is, like the weapons that Derek Carr would have to work with. I mean, you think of Taysom Hill right at right at wide receiver and tight end. Boom, there's your starter right there. No, but you know the relationship he has with Dennis Allen. I think I think it would just be a really good fit. Where I'd want him to go, I would love to see Derek Carr in Tampa Bay, and I feel like that's a team that people are sort of forgetting about. Tampa Bay's offense is kind of like win now. Like,
yeah.
Granted that Tom Brady couldn't really make it work, so what says Derek Carr would be able to? But you think about just some of those weapons, fantasy wise. Like I'm talking like dynasty, just fantasy in general. Derek Carr in Tampa Bay could be a lot of fun, if I'm being completely honest with you.
It could be, but something feels fundamentally broken in Tampa. And I don't know if it was coaching staff, because realistically, like, Tom missed more throws that year than I think since like the last year with New England. That was when I thought he was getting over the hill. But he still looked this go round like he was in still like physical condition. Like he didn't look old, like he did at the end of his tenure with the Patriots. So that makes me just feel like something was off, and I don't know exactly what it was. I mean, because Mike Evans was healthy for most of the year. Run game wasn't horrible, especially, I mean, Rachaad White had a solid year once they started plugging him in more than Lenny. O-line wasn't awful. I don't know. Something was just off there, and I don't know if it was a...
maybe it was Byron Leftwich, who's now gone.
It could, I was going to say, it could have been Leftwich. It could have been, why am I blanking on the head coach's name?
Todd Bowles.
Todd Bowles. He looks like Bunny Colvin from The Wire, so I always want to say Colvin. But yeah, and like I don't know exactly if they just weren't meshing all together, right? I mean, but I think one thing is for certain there, and I don't want to take a deep dive on everything. It just sort of some thoughts, but it's so weird that Bruce Arians and Tom sort of had some falling out, because I felt like they were perfect for each other. And it's very clear that like he was the thing that made that engine go.
It feels a lot like sort of what's happened in Kansas City, right, with Andy Reid. Just he is the candidate. Yeah. You can have guys sprout from the tree, but it just is Andy Reid. It's just he can't really replicate it. And Todd Bowles didn't really do all that well in his first go around as a head coach. Jets. So there's no guarantee that it's going to go right this time. So that's why I didn't put him as I think that'll happen. I still think the connection to Dennis Allen makes a lot of sense in New Orleans, because that team is just a team that will not give up. Right? They have to be in it. They can't rebuild for whatever reason.
I got a better one for them, Jack. A little bit later.
Okay, go on. Okay, all right. We'll get to that. Let's start with so I'm going to group these next two together. For me, but specifically, I don't know if you had the same thing. Let's go with Aaron Rodgers next.
I think I know who you're grouping him in with, and I'll be quick with mine, because I had the same thought, but the card to the Jets is just there's too much smoke there, and I think that's an easy fit. I have Aaron Rodgers going to the Raiders. I think speaking of smoke and fire, I mean, that him and Devontae. There's no shot Devontae hasn't texted him every single day before his darkness retreat and said, "Hey, buddy." He's starting to get into his psyche. So when he's on those mushrooms, that all he sees is Devontae Adams sitting in front of him, crisscross applesauce, telling him how great it is in Vegas. That's where I got him going.
Okay. So I'm just going to group the next two together as sort of a surprise, and then I'll sort of give you. So what I think will happen, Aaron Rodgers stays in Green Bay. Zach Wilson stays with the Jets. What I would love to happen is for those two to flip-flop, because Green Bay Packers fans having to deal with Zach Wilson would be just peak comedy. And Aaron Rodgers in New York would also be pretty funny, and just like as just a complete follow-up to the Favre stuff, it would be pretty mind-blowing for that to happen basically 2 times in a row. The reason, Frank, I think they're both going to stay is I just can't see Green Bay moving on. I really can't. And on the Jets side of it, I don't really know what they could get for Zach Wilson at this point. Like, what makes it worth it to let him go as opposed to unless he's just like the absolute worst teammate, like we've kind of heard he might be. What does getting rid of him do besides just make your franchise look foolish? Like, I don't know if it's as bad as the Josh Rosen stuff. Like, he doesn't seem as bad as Josh Rosen, which is kind of crazy to say, but I don't know where he go. Like, what team would want to take a chance on Zach Wilson at this point? Out of all of these teams I have listed looking for quarterback help, not all of them, because some of them are going to draft rookies. We already know that. But I just don't know where else he could possibly go at this point.
Yeah, I feel the exact same way, and that was the scenario that I wanted. I wanted Rodgers with the Jets because I think that's an easy pitch. You have a couple years left. We'll take on that whole contract. We have some of the best young weapons in the league at every position. This is easy money for you. Get in here, try to get us a ring. With Zach, but to me, the trade would make sense to Green Bay because now at least you have another young quarterback to reel out there. I mean, because this was my point last year. And again, I know people don't think that I can be, or like either of us can be subjective here, but I think that was a not subjective, objective, but that was a pretty objective take that we had last year is that, look, it sort of just run its course with Rodgers in Green Bay. It's like, you know what I mean? Like he had an illustrious career there. He's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Last year was the year to get 3 firsts for him and completely expedite the rebuilding process. And not for nothing, you get the whole year to test out the rookie that you drafted in the first round 15 years ago. The guy's got grandkids already. But to me in this situation, this makes sense as well because you still have Jordan Love on that team. You reel him out for a year, maybe a half year. If he's not there, try it out and see what you have in Zach Wilson. Because again, one of two things is going to happen. Both in scenario one, both absolutely suck. You win 2 games and you get to go out and pick your quarterback next year. Caleb, whatever his name is from USC. USC. I know a lot of people are high on him. Or one of them winds up being way fucking better than you thought. And now you can build around them. That expedites your process because you have X amount of first round picks. That scenario still makes sense. I don't think you're getting 3 this go round for Rodgers, but you might get 1 or 2. And that if you can solve that problem in this year that you had no expectations, that's all the better. That's a cherry on top. But specifically Zach Wilson, I agree with you. I don't think, I mean, you have to just ride it out until you probably just cut him. Like, I think it's more embarrassing for you as a franchise if you give him up for a 7th round pick than like literally just letting him play 4 years and letting him walk. Or like, I don't want to say play, letting him sit on the roster for 4 years. Because what can you get? Even quarterbacks who are desperate for a quarterback, you think of like Atlanta needs one pretty bad. Houston needs one pretty bad. They're all looking probably at rookies over him. Or if not, they're looking at someone super steady, that like a veteran that's super steady to get them, you know, to have a sort of, you know, riding the ship type of year. Like, what does Zach Wilson provide for you on a quarterback needy team, even a young team? Like, imagine if the Bears were in this situation. Let's say we didn't have the first pick, but we don't have Justin Fields. We trotted out, you know, whoever we trotted out this year, and we won 4 games, 5 games. We have the 5th pick. So it's very clear we either trade up or like trade a 5th for Zach Wilson. That's an easy scenario. Why in the world would we want to trade anything for Zach Wilson? What would he do for the remaining years of his rookie deal with the Bears? You know what I mean? Right. So it's like, and I feel like any other team would have that outlook on him. He's just not very good at the NFL level.
Yeah. And the maturity stuff, you factor that and also into his playing level. And it's just like, I don't know how you justify taking a risk like that unless the Panthers just want to go just all in on the bit and just go and trade for Zach Wilson.
I want someone to one day.
I know you do. And maybe we'll see it. Another big domino piece, Lamar Jackson. Frank, I have a couple thinks and wants here for him. So I want Lamar Jackson to go to Atlanta.
I do too.
Just the smoke, like you were talking about the smoke with Derek Carr. The Atlanta stuff, I feel like would just be a ton of fun. It's by far the best wide receivers he'd ever have in his career. You think of the running backs they have already ready to go. That would be a really fun mix. And then what I'd want, and this might be a surprise, and this is taking out of I'm taking my Bears fandom hat off for this one. I would like Lamar Jackson to go to Indianapolis. You think of the weapons that he would have in Indianapolis. You think of the offensive line. him being paired with Jonathan Taylor, him being paired with just a really good defense. And you think about how Jalen Hurts was used in Shane Steichen's offense, obviously Nick Sirianni's as well, but same tree. Like, you can't tell me that Lamar Jackson wouldn't have success in that offense as well with the types of weapons that he would have to work with in Indy. I think that would be a really, really fun mix. Obviously, as a Bears fan, I don't want that to happen because that means they're probably not trading you the number 4 overall pick. But I just think as from a pure Lamar Jackson standpoint, that would be a very fun team for him to go to.
I agree. My want was Atlanta. I just think that that's such a fit. And I mean, it's like Vic 2.0. Like, that fan base is used to that style of quarterback, and that would be phenomenal. But ultimately, I think he stays in Baltimore. I think he's going to take the same route that Kirk Cousins did. It's going to be 2 franchise tags, and then he's going to walk. But I think this is the route that he wants. Like, he's his own agent. He wants to have that level of control that Kirk Cousins did. And the only way to do that is to walk through that fire and be on these 1-year, $40 million deals or whatever the hell the cap number is now. Before he gets to choose his own team.
It's just it's interesting. This is a very interesting situation because I can't necessarily. I know a lot of people are just like shell shocked that the Ravens would even consider letting him go and just haven't paid him and this and that. But like, and you be realistic about Lamar Jackson and sort of where his career has sort of started heading. If I'm a Ravens fan, I don't really know if I want them paying him that much money. I mean, you kind of look at, and I know stats aren't everything, but in 2021 and 2022, 17 touchdowns, 16 passing touchdowns, it's just like he hasn't topped 3,000. He's only topped 3,000 passing yards once, and that was back in 2019. And again, I know that's not really his game. But, I mean, you look at the rushing numbers, those are all down. He only had 5 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 years. That's not going to get better as he ages. Right?
Yeah, I think
you really are banking on him developing as a passer. And, where the Ravens are right now, I don't really know if they can afford to do that because they don't have the weapons for him.
Yeah, I think the weird thing, and I have some friends who are Baltimore Ravens fans. I think he's a better passer than what people give him credit for. And I'm not saying that you just completely downplayed his passing, but he's not like a pure pocket guy. Him and Fields are probably the 2 best runners in the league at quarterback. So like, that's always going to be a part of his game. It was something about the offensive coordinator. What is his first name? Greg Roman. Greg Roman. I don't know. Why do I want to call him Bill Roman? Greg Roman. He never takes any sort of heat for anything. And I do think ultimately all signs sort of pointed to him. Like, I know he got a ton of credit, deservedly so, when they changed it to a full-out rushing power O offense early in Lamar's career. But then he sort of made the pivot and said, you know what, Lamar, we're going to do some more things through the air, and Lamar won MVP. For them to not be able to continue to add on to that, because Lamar hasn't looked very different to me in terms of what he could do on a football field. I don't know. It just felt like it was the OC and the offensive philosophy as a whole. Like, they needed someone to put them over the top. And it wasn't Roman to do it. But my greatest concern with Lamar himself is just the injuries. You look at someone that runs the ball out like Josh Allen, like Justin Fields, like Cam Newton prior to, him getting older. Those are big guys. I still don't want them taking unnecessary hits. But if they take a dinger every now and then, they're built for that. Lamar can't slide for shit. He doesn't like to get out of bounds. And you like that fire in a player, but he's a slender dude. He's not built the way that they are, to sustain those types of hits. And that's what would worry me if I was a Baltimore Ravens fan.
Yeah, and again, paying him all that money when there's still a lot of room for your roster overall to improve. It's not like, they plug in Lamar Jackson and they're instant Super Bowl Super Bowl favorites, I should say. So it's really it's an interesting balancing act. I'm curious to see what does end up happening there. A couple more mid-level guys that obviously won't take as much time to talk through. But let's start with the comeback player of the year, Geno Smith. For me, Frank, this is an easy one. I think he's going to stay in Seattle, and I want him to stay in Seattle. I really don't see any other any other option for them. It seems like a really just an easy plug and play for Pete Carroll as a team that wants to win now. What do you think? Do you have Geno moving at all?
What I think is going to happen, Jack, is the Bears will swap picks with Seattle and acquire Geno Smith in the meantime, and then trade Justin Fields for a 4th round pick, since he's not a very good quarterback, and then we have our quarterback of the future. No, I think Geno stays in Seattle. It makes the most sense, because just looking at him, like, personality-wise, I think he fits. Like, if you just gave his personality to Russell Wilson, Russell would still be in Seattle. In complete honesty, like, he's just, I think, the perfect fit for Pete and what he wants to do. Not only just skill set, but just like in the locker room as well. And I don't think he's going to demand an absurd amount of money. Like, I think the contract is going to fit for them to continue to build, to be playoff contenders for the next few years.
The rumors I've seen, man, the arguments for trading Justin Fields.
Well, have you seen the meme? It's been really funny. It's like, well, NFL fans, and then it's a quotation mark, Justin Fields sucks, he can't throw. And then it's like also NFL fans, and it's like him photoshopped in every one of their favorite team's jerseys.
Well, yeah, that's why they're doing it. They want him to get traded. They want him on the team. It's so funny. It's like the Bears have literally never had stability at the quarterback position outside of Jay Cutler, and obviously Justin Fields' ceiling is infinitely higher than Jay Cutler's at this point. But it's like people are just so quick to act like, well, Justin Fields, he's nothing. He's never going to be anything. You might as well move on and start the process. So it's like, goddamn, like, can you just let us have one? I don't see these conversations being had with literally any other quarterback outside of Justin Fields. It's very strange. Even Zach Wilson, people are still like, oh, hold on, just give him some time. It's like, come on, man, what are we doing here? All right, veteran quarterbacks that we wanted to continue with here, Matt Ryan. So Frank, obviously an asterisk next to this one. I do not believe Matt Ryan will be going anywhere to be a starter. I think he is clearly going somewhere to be a backup, but a very, well-paid Joe Flacco-esque type backup that really doesn't play that well when they get in, but that doesn't matter. It's all about the name and grooming or helping develop a quarterback in front of them, a younger guy. So I have Matt Ryan going to New England, Frank, as Mac Jones' backup. They do need a quarterback, or I should say they need some sort of safety net at quarterback, unless you really believe that Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi are both going to just rebound and be, absolutely incredible. And Matt Ryan just kind of seems like a Bill Belichick guy. He seems kind of like he has that Tom Brady demeanor. And I think he would be a really good tutor for Mac Jones to help him develop even more so. So I think that could happen. And then kind of like wanting it to happen, I could also see him going to like Houston and being just the backup quarterback there for Bryce Young's sake.
This is where I provide that stability for New Orleans. Because he's not going to give up. They're not going to give up. He's going to sign, a 1-year, $15 million deal. Oh, yeah. I think he's going to New Orleans.
Okay. I could also see him going to Tampa Bay and trying it out.
I can too. Spoiler alert, I didn't add them to my list because I do think they're going to have a complete teardown. I don't think. You
think they're just gone? You think they're blowing it up? Hey,
yeah.
We'll take Mike Evans here in Chicago. We'll take Chris Godwin too. We'll take them both.
I will. Yes, I will take both of them.
All right, Carson Wentz. So, full disclosure, Frank, I do think he is going somewhere to be a starter.
Oh,
but for half the season, and that's because I have him going to Arizona, and I have him playing on that team until Kyler Murray is healthy and ready to go. I think they'll want a stopgap quarterback to, just keep things afloat until they sort of are able to kind of get on track with Kyler. What do you think about that?
That's a good one. I really like that one. I didn't even consider Arizona for this exercise either. I was thinking long-term or for the year. That's a really fucking good one. But here's where I got Carolina kind of leaning into it. I had to get them in here somehow, Jackie. They're going Carson Wentz, baby. Carson, dude, the off season or the mini camp videos between Carson Wentz and Sam Darnold are going to be phenomenal. I'm almost kicking myself in the ass that I didn't put Baker back on that fucking team because I want that so bad.
I forgot. I did forget that Carolina does have Frank Reich, and that's his boy.
I didn't even make that connection, but there's the little warm connection there.
That's his boy. Maybe that could definitely be a realistic option. I'm going to stick with my Carolina or my Arizona one, but Carolina would just be chef's kiss hilarious if he ends up there with Frank Reich again. Oh man, that'd be good because our guy Avram is a big Panthers fan, so we'd have to have him on to talk about that. Jimmy Garoppolo, Frank. This is where Las Vegas makes their move to me. You got the connection right there with Josh McDaniels, and I don't think Jimmy G is going to cost a whole lot at this point. I know he was looking for a big contract. That never happened last year. He just is coming off of an injury or a season where he finished out being injured. He's not going to get big money. And the Raiders aren't going to have to pay a lot to get him. But he's a guy, even if they draft someone, like if they trade up and get Will Levis or if they end up drafting CJ Stroud, you get Jimmy G. Now you can let them sit for a little bit. And sort of go that route. So I just think it makes a lot of sense given who the head coach is, the relationship with Jimmy G, the cost factor, because it's not going to hamper it's not paying $50 million to Aaron Rodgers. You're still going to be able to make some additional moves as well if you go that route with Jimmy G.
All those points remain for me, and that's why I have him going to Houston, because I do think that would still allow them to draft a young guy, Jimmy G. If he's a backup anyway, he's probably the best backup quarterback in the league if he's your number 2. But Houston also, they have this like identity to me that I almost feel like it could be a Mike Glennon Bears situation where it's like they really do think like, hey, we could shelve our quarterback for a year or two if he can push us to the playoffs. Because that just seems to be the identity there. I also kind of feel if they get Jimmy G, they might not even draft a quarterback this year. Is that a crazy thought?
Oh man, that would really hurt the Bears if they don't draft a quarterback.
I don't think it would because I to be honest with you, I think the lead contenders right now, and until I see anything different, are Carolina and Indy.
Yeah,
I think Houston, even if they want a quarterback, they're okay with settling for whoever's there at number 2.
Okay. All right, I kind of like that fit. I can kind of see where you're going there. The next two I'm going to group together because I just think this is a little more. I don't necessarily think this will happen, but I kind of want it to, so I'm just going to mold them together. I want a flip. Trey Lance to the Giants, Daniel Jones to the San Francisco 49ers. Tell me that both of those teams wouldn't be good fits for those two quarterbacks. You got Brian Dable having his athletic young quarterback that he can develop in Trey Lance. San Francisco gets another mobile quarterback that Kyle Shanahan can transform into just the greatest quarterback of all time. Frank, him getting $45 million is not going to fucking happen. I don't know what
that's insane.
Daniel Jones thinks he's in, but that's not going to happen. If they do come to that, to that point where they're like, dude, we're not paying you, and he's like, well, I'm not signing here. I could absolutely see them moving him. And what better team than San Francisco or Baltimore, I guess. But I'm going to stick with San Francisco.
Where are his options if no one's going to pay him that money? Mm-mm. So and that's what makes me think. I love your idea. I do think it's logical, and I think they're good fits there. But that's why I think he stays put with New York. They either tag him or they come to an agreement to get him down to like. What is like an average starting quarterback make? Is it 30 million, 28 million in that range?
You watch the playoffs, and you really justify giving him $30 million?
Yeah, but it's also like, where do they go from there? If that's their floor with him, unless they can get Lamar, that would be fucking phenomenal too, actually. I'm thinking about it.
Like, Frank, Like, Daniel Jones is asking for $45 million.
I know.
He threw 15 touchdowns last season.
He did run for like
7.
He ran for like 300 yards on the Bears.
He ran for 7. But man, you can't justify that. You can't justify paying him $45 million.
I agree, but I also think Trey Lance stays put too. With in my scenario, Jimmy G being gone, and I think in every scenario he's gone. I don't think he's going back to San Francisco. No. I think San Francisco, outside of them just being a curse for quarterbacks health wise, that's not the worst spot to be in. You got Brock Purdy and Trey Lance in a quarterback battle this offseason. I don't think that's the worst, especially with the way that Purdy played.
No, I agree. And again, I think it's very strange how many people were excited for Trey Lance last year and then have just completely given up on him. It's just a very strange shift to a guy who was hurt. And it's not like he played the one game he played was in that rainstorm where nobody would have been good. So yeah, I'm curious to see what happens with Trey Lance. I think that flip would be really fun. Like I said, Brian Dable with Trey Lance there's like that to me would be like Josh Allen 2.0. Like not necessarily the player with that ceiling, but just like that development, that style that they play, it's very reminiscent to what Josh Allen was in Buffalo before he became Josh Allen. The last one, Baker Mayfield. Frank, I just have him staying in Los Angeles as the backup because, I mean, Matt Stafford is locked in as the starter, but there's no guarantee he's going to be healthy anymore. Like this could be an injury that not necessarily ends his career, but it could be the one that starts pushing him down that path where, we don't know what he's going to look like. I think the Rams would be kind of foolish to let Baker go when you have a competent backup, especially on Baker's side. He would be kind of foolish. I think he should kind of go the Mitch Trubisky route where it's like, stay as a backup and just play it out and see what happens, when you get an opportunity and, maybe you build it yourself. Because I mean, who is going to sign Baker Mayfield at this point? What any of these teams that we've listed, who would really go out of their way to go and get Baker and act like that's an upgrade from where they're currently at?
Yeah, I totally agree with your sentiments. And that's why I think the Rams are his best fit, not only because what he showed them last year is like McVay can work with this. Like it's very clear that they can do a little, at least something with him. But even from his standpoint, not only just like you said, teams really aren't going to pursue him outside of maybe being a backup, which he's going to be the backup with the Rams, but this is your probably best shot to play again in a year or two. Because Stafford, that injury, you may be talking about retirement, not this offseason, but next. And if you sign a 2-year deal, with incentives to say, hey, if I start X amount of games or if I win a playoff game or whatever, like I think this is the best scenario for him personally and, for the team too, just to have. Because I think they are going to be, as long as Sean McVay is there, they're going to be in the same boat that New Orleans was in. They're never going to completely blow it up. And this, to me, would expedite them sort of keeping afloat being that playoff team versus letting him go, having Matt Stafford, and then having who at backup quarterback, Josh Johnson or something. You know what I mean? And like you're talking about a total wasted year versus having someone who's been there for a few years in the system, can plug right in, get you 8, 9, 10 wins, depending on how you build around him, and then continuing to go that way. I just don't ever see them completely blowing things up. They've traded too many draft picks with this regime.
Agreed. And I think that kind of does it in terms of teams. The rest of the teams, I think will draft Indianapolis. I think they're pretty much locked in to draft a quarterback. The Panthers, definitely. The Raiders, Texans, obviously, teams I didn't mention. I'll be curious as well to see who the Bears get, as a potential draft pick later on to play quarterback or at least backup quarterback for them. Because I know Trevor Siemian is still, on the roster, but he was also hurt all year, and then we saw what happened when he wasn't available. So, but yeah, this quarterback season should be very interesting to see where some certain guys land. I know you mentioned it was a little bit more difficult than last year. It wasn't as I think I agree with you. There really isn't as much clarity, like even at the top, right, with Derek Carr. Like the one guy will absolutely be on a different team this upcoming season. We still have no clue where that's going to be.
Yep.
So it's very interesting to see what will happen here. But this has been the Bear With Us podcast. We really appreciate you guys listening. We're going to keep doing fun stuff like this all year, or all off season, I should say. We'll get a little more into the draft stuff as that sort of comes along, and hopefully we'll have some Bears news to go along the way, Frank.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. This is just, the first episode of many this offseason where we'll take like deep dives on things and have some fun with it. But again, this is going to be the first time that we have a high draft pick. We have a quarterback. I think we're going to have fun with some of the content. We'll do the normal stuff like ranking the positions and dynasty stuff and all of that. But yeah, we are in for a very, very fun offseason.
Until then, we will talk to you later.
Later, Jackie. Later, everybody.
Everybody love everybody!